Thanks for logging on to myfoxhurricane.com. Still watching this area down across the Caribbean. Hurricane Center's been highlighting this for several days. Nothing there right now, but more and more of those computer models really starting to show that idea that as we go through the next several days, we're going to start to see this area low pressure, broad area low pressure, slow to develop, but we're going to start to see something developing down in this region as we go through the next few days. So Hurricane Center putting in about that 40% chance of development over the next 7 days. But you do see some areas of convection, very disorganized, no signs of any broad low pressure just yet, but this is the area that we're watching. We've got the warm water in place. We have relatively low winds in the atmosphere, so we've got that low wind shear. So we've got the ingredients that tell us that if you can get all these ingredients in place, that, yeah, maybe something will actually happen. You're looking at the Fox model here, and notice as we go through the next several days, you start to see that broad area low pressure, very disorganized, but showing a bit more development as we head through the weekend and into the first part of next week. Remember, plenty of warm water in here, so the conditions are feasible and conducive that we could see something developing down here. So we look at the GFS, and what we're looking at is that spin in the atmosphere. And again, it's not much, but you're seeing some of that as we work our way into the first part of next week as well. Same idea with the European, although the European does not show as much of that. But we're seeing at least a little bit more consensus among many of the computer models that we're going to see something slowly developing down in this area. The question is, where does it end up going? Because as we continue to slow this process down, high pressure building in across the east, eventually that corridor pushing on into the Atlantic, that becomes closed down for a while. And so some of the models are actually pushing this back towards the Gulf of Mexico. Now, all these are still big what ifs and question marks because the timing of something that doesn't yet exist, well, that's a really hard thing to do. So we basically have to kind of wait and see over the next several days. But the important thing to remember is, yeah, we have plenty of warm water, plenty of heat down across the Caribbean. But notice anything, if it were to move up into the Gulf of Mexico, completely different than what we saw just a month ago. Waters have cooled. You just don't have as much of that heat in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. So anything that were to move up into the Gulf of Mexico would be at a disadvantage. There's not as much of that energy to tap, and this would be a much weaker system and probably fairly poorly defined. So it's still a wait and see as we go through the next several days. Of course, we'll keep you updated right here on myfoxhurricane.com.